If you were standing in the room, the first thing you would notice wasn't the blood. There was surprisingly little blood. The first thing you would notice was the sound. Clack. It is a dry, hollow sound, like a branch snapping underwater. It is the sound of a carpenter's hammer striking the head of a steel spike. It is the sound of the thin layer of bone above your eye socket, the orbital plate, shattering. In the 1940s and 50s, this sound echoed through asylum hallways, hotel rooms, and the back of station wagons across America. It was the sound of a cure. The man holding the hammer was Dr. Walter Freeman. He wasn't a murderer in the eyes of the law. He was a celebrity. He was the president of the American Board of Psychiatry. He believed he had found the solution to human suffering. He didn't need a sterile operating room. He didn't need anesthesia. He didn't need to wash his hands. He just needed 10 minutes, a bold ego, and an ice pick from his kitchen drawer. By the time he was finished, he had performed this procedure on 3,500 men, women, and children. He silenced them. Not by killing them, but by taking away the part of them that makes a human being human. To understand why a doctor would drive a metal spike into a patient's brain, you first have to understand the hell that was the American asylum system in 1935. We like to think of hospitals as places of healing. But in the early 20th century, a state mental hospital was a prison for the inconvenient. There were no antipsychotic drugs. Thorazine wouldn't be invented for another 20 years. If you walked into a ward in 1935, the smell would hit you first. A mixture of unwashed bodies, industrial bleach, and rotting food. Then, the noise. A constant, deafening roar of screaming, crying, and metal chains rattling against radiators. 400,000 Americans were locked inside these facilities. The treatments were medieval. Doctors used hydrotherapy, a polite name for strapping a patient into a tub of boiling hot or freezing cold water for days at a time until their skin peeled or they went numb. They used insulin coma therapy, injecting patients with massive doses of insulin to crash their blood sugar, sending them into violent seizures and comas, hoping it would reset the brain. It rarely worked. The doctors were desperate. The families were exhausted. The state governments were broke. They wanted a quick fix. They wanted silence. And then a Portuguese neurologist named Egas Moniz gave them an answer. Moniz theorized that mental illness was caused by sticky thoughts, neural pathways that looped over and over again in the frontal lobes. He believed that if you physically cut those pathways, if you severed the connection between the thinking brain and the feeling brain, the patient would calm down. In 1935, Moniz performed the first leucotomy. He drilled holes into the skull and poured pure alcohol into the brain to melt the tissue. Later, he used a wire loop to core out chunks of the frontal lobe like an apple. The results were mixed. Some patients died, some had seizures, but the survivors, they were quiet. They stopped screaming. They stopped fighting the nurses. They sat in their chairs. They stared at the walls. They were docile. For this discovery, Egas Moniz was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine. The medical world cheered, but in Washington, D.C., Dr. Walter Freeman looked at the procedure and frowned. Drilling holes in the skull was too messy. It required a neurosurgeon. It required an operating room. It took hours. Freeman wasn't a surgeon. He was a neurologist. He wanted something faster. He wanted a technique he could perform on an assembly line. He wanted to bring the surgery to the masses. Freeman went to his kitchen. He opened the drawer. He found an ice pick. He held it in his hand, testing the weight. He realized the human skull had a back door. The bone at the top of the eye socket is paper thin. Behind it lies the frontal lobe. If he could access the brain through the eye, he wouldn't need to drill into the skull. He developed the Transorbital Lobotomy. The procedure was brutally, shockingly simple. First, the anesthesia. Freeman hated hiring anesthesiologists. They were expensive and they asked too many questions. So he used electricity. He built a portable electroshock box. He would attach electrodes to the patient's temples and blast them with enough voltage to induce a grand mal seizure. While the patient was twitching and unconscious, the clock started. Freeman would lift the upper eyelid. He placed the point of the ice pick, later refined into a surgical instrument called a leucotome, though it was essentially the same shape, against the tear duct. He aimed it slightly upward towards the top of the head. Then, he picked up a carpenter's hammer. Clack. One sharp tap. The instrument punched through the bone and entered the brain. This is where the science ended and the butchery began. Freeman didn't have a view of the inside of the brain. He was working blind. He would verify the depth, usually about 2 inches deep. And then he would begin the swish. He swung the handle of the instrument side to side. He wasn't cutting with precision. He was sweeping the metal rod through the delicate white matter of the brain. He described it as scrambling the lobes. He severed the nerves that allowed the patient to feel intense emotion. But he also severed the nerves that allowed them to plan, to dream, and to be themselves. He did the left eye. Then he switched hands and did the right eye. The entire process took less than 10 minutes. Freeman didn't wear a mask. He didn't wear sterile gloves. There are reports of him stopping in the middle of a surgery to pose for a photo or resting the hammer on the patient's chest to light a cigarette. He was a showman. He loved an audience. Once, to impress a group of journalists, he lobotomized 2 patients at the same time. One with his left hand, one with his right. He called it a head-to-head competition. He timed himself with a stopwatch. When the patient woke up, they would have 2 black eyes. The swelling was massive. Freeman would often grab them by the shoulders and ask, "How do you feel?" Often they would smile vacantly and say, "I feel fine." Freeman took this as proof of a cure. He ignored the fact that they often wet themselves an hour later, or that they couldn't remember how to use a fork. He took a photo of them smiling, put it in his file, and moved on to the next patient. Freeman claimed his treatment was for the hopelessly insane. But soon, the definition of insane began to widen. It wasn't just for schizophrenics anymore. It was for the depressed, the anxious, the rebellious. His most famous victim fit none of these categories. She was American royalty. Rosemary Kennedy was the eldest sister of John, Robert, and Ted Kennedy. In 1941, she was 23 years old. By all accounts, she was a vibrant, beautiful young woman. She was presented to the King and Queen of England. She smiled for the cameras, but she struggled. She had a mild learning disability. She had mood swings, and most dangerously for the Kennedy family, she had a rebellious streak. She liked to sneak out at night. She liked boys. Her father, Joseph Kennedy, was terrified. He was grooming his sons for the White House. He couldn't afford a scandal. An illegitimate pregnancy or a public outburst would ruin the political dynasty he was building. So, Joe Kennedy looked for a solution. He found Dr. Walter Freeman. He didn't tell Rosemary's mother, Rose. He didn't tell her brothers. He scheduled the surgery in secret. In November 1941, Rosemary was taken to a hospital in Washington, D.C. She walked in wearing a stylish hat, clutching her purse, perhaps thinking she was going for a checkup. She was strapped to a table. For this specific surgery, Freeman didn't use electroshock. He gave her a mild local anesthetic. He needed her awake. He needed her to talk to him while he cut, so he would know when he had destroyed enough of the brain. He asked Rosemary to recite the Lord's Prayer. He asked her to sing "God Bless America." The surgeon began to cut. Rosemary began to sing "God Bless America, Land That I..." He cut deeper. Her voice began to slur. The melody fell apart. "Stand beside her..." He made another sweep. Her words turned into mumbling. And then silence. The knife stopped. Rosemary Kennedy was gone. The woman on the table was alive, but the light behind her eyes had been extinguished. She had regressed to the mental state of a 2-year-old child. She couldn't walk. She couldn't speak intelligible words. She lost control of her bladder. One of her arms became permanently paralyzed. The cure had destroyed her. Joe Kennedy realized immediately what he had done, but he didn't seek help. He sought containment. He shipped Rosemary off to a Catholic institution in Wisconsin. He told the public she was reclusive. He erased her from the family narrative. For 20 years, her own mother didn't visit her, while her brother John stood on the steps of the Capitol and became the most powerful man on earth. Rosemary sat in a dark room, staring at a wall, drooling on herself. She remained hidden for 60 years, the ghost of the Kennedy dynasty. You would think a tragedy like this would stop Freeman. It didn't. It emboldened him. He believed the Kennedys just had bad luck. He believed he was a savior. In the late 1940s, he grew tired of waiting for patients to come to him, so he took the show on the road. He bought a station wagon. He outfitted the back with his electroshock machine, his hammers, and his ice picks. He nicknamed it the Lobotomobile. He drove across rural America, stopping at state asylums in West Virginia, Ohio, and Iowa. It was a macabre road trip. He would pull up to a hospital, greet the staff like a celebrity, and ask, "Who do you have for me today?" He operated with a reckless speed. In one 12-day trip, he lobotomized 225 people. That is nearly 20 people a day. He charged $25 per brain. He kept a diary of these trips. He wrote about the diners he ate at, the scenery he saw, and the brains he destroyed, all in the same casual tone. Stopped for a burger, excellent pie. Did 15 transorbitals in the afternoon. Good day. The criteria for surgery began to slip. It wasn't just for the violently insane anymore. Husbands brought in wives who were melancholic or disobedient. Parents brought in children. Howard Dully was 12 years old. He wasn't schizophrenic. He wasn't hallucinating. He was just a boy. He was loud. He didn't listen to his stepmother. He daydreamed. His stepmother hated him. She took him to Dr. Freeman. Other doctors said Howard was normal. Freeman ignored them. He saw a problem he could fix. He drove the ice picks into the 12-year-old's eye sockets. Howard survived, but he spent his life feeling like a foggy stranger in his own body. He later said, "I felt like a zombie. I lost my childhood. I lost me." Dr. Freeman noted in his file that the boy was much easier to handle now. The carnage continued until 1967. By then, the world was changing. New drugs like Thorazine proved you could calm a patient without destroying their brain. But Freeman wouldn't stop. He refused to believe a pill could replace his knife. He was performing a lobotomy on a housewife named Helen Mortensen. It was her third one. He was maneuvering the pick when his hand slipped. He severed a blood vessel deep in her brain. She hemorrhaged and died on the table 3 days later. Finally, after 3,500 procedures, Walter Freeman was stripped of his medical license. He spent his final years traveling the country in his camper van, trying to track down his old patients. He wanted them to tell him he was a hero. He wanted validation. He found very little. Many had relapsed, many were vegetables, many had died by suicide. Freeman died of cancer in 1972. He never apologized. Today, the lobotomy is viewed as a barbaric mistake. But we cannot forget that it wasn't done in a back alley by a criminal. It was done in state hospitals funded by tax dollars, performed by the president of the medical board, and awarded a Nobel Prize. It happened because people wanted an easy answer to a difficult problem. They didn't want to hear the screaming anymore, so they chose the silence. There are thousands of unmarked graves across America, filled with the victims of the ice pick. And there are thousands more who lived out their days in quiet rooms, staring at nothing, trapping their screams inside their own heads. The ice pick is back in the kitchen drawer. But the question remains, how many geniuses, how many poets, how many souls did we erase just because they were inconvenient? Subscribe to After the Silence.